Ethan Morales stood before the bathroom mirror, intently studying his own face. The early morning light usually made his features appear softer, but lately it did nothing to mask the fatigue around his eyes. He was a father of two, a beleaguered husband, and a longtime employee at an automotive parts factory that was teetering on the brink of closure. His wife, Amanda, had noticed the restlessness in his sleep, his propensity to stare off into the distance, lost in thought. Today, though, something felt different. As Ethan glanced at his reflection, he had the uncanny feeling that it was late in catching his movements by a fraction of a second. He lifted one hand to scratch his head, and it almost seemed as though the arm in the mirror did not follow. He told himself it must be the morning grogginess messing with his head. Perhaps a reflection in poor lighting could distort small gestures and timing. He exhaled heavily and moved away from the mirror, but the unease clung to him like a second coat of skin. With a final, nervous glance, he left the bathroom to rouse his kids for school. Distorted mirror images, he figured, had no place in the day's pressing schedule, which included packing lunches, paying overdue bills, and trying to reason with his teenage daughter about curfew. When Ethan entered the kitchen, he tried to shake off the lingering discomfort. Little Maya, his 6-year-old, tugged at his sleeve and pointed at the half-empty cereal box, while Sam, his 13-year-old daughter, scrolled through her phone, doing her best to block out the world. As Ethan poured cereal for Maya, he noticed how heavy his arms felt, as though gravity had tightened its pull just on him. Sleep deprivation, he thought. "You're not losing it yet. Dad, can I have money for the field trip tomorrow?" Sam asked casually, fiddling with the hem of her shirt. Her hazel eyes met his, and she offered a small, hopeful grin. Ethan forced a smile. "I'll see what I can do," he said. He fished for his wallet, remembering that he might not have enough to cover groceries, the electric bill, and her field trip, but he refused to burden Sam with that. "Don't worry," was all he said before passing her a few wrinkled bills. Amanda bustled in, rummaging through drawers for some important paperwork she needed for a doctor's appointment. "Have you seen my folder?" she asked Ethan, a note of exasperation tinging her voice. Gone were the days they would greet each other with a warm hug or a playful remark. Now even basic communication took the form of frantic, functional questions. Ethan nodded toward the countertop. "Right there," he said. She grabbed the folder, gave a quick but tense thanks, and rushed out, telling the kids she loved them before reminding Sam to catch the bus on time. Ethan clenched his jaw as the front door closed behind her. Every day, they drifted a little further apart. He wondered if it was the onslaught of bills, or if their once sweet, easy connection had rotted from the inside. Later that morning, Ethan's unsettling mirror moment began to fade in memory, but it never fully disappeared. It loomed in the recesses of his mind, creeping up whenever he caught his reflection in the polished surfaces of the house. Each glint on the faucet, each reflection in the doorknob, gave him a flicker of disquiet. Rational thought told him that it was common for illusions to occur when one jumped at shadows, but a deeper instinct insisted something was off. At the factory, he tried to refocus on work, drudging through quality inspections on conveyor belts of metal parts. For much of the day, the tasks were mechanical, each piece checked, then set aside. The repetitiveness allowed his mind to wander. He occasionally glimpsed his reflection in the dull sheen of a car fender or in the puddle of water near a leaking pipe. Every time, just for an instant, he thought he saw the reflection move out of sync. "Hey, Morales," barked his supervisor, pulling him back to reality. The supervisor frowned, scanning Ethan's face. "You with us today?" Ethan straightened. "Yes, sir. Sorry." "Stay focused," the man said. "We can't afford mistakes." Ethan nodded. Affording mistakes was a luxury he no longer had, and he needed to keep this job for however long it would last. He pushed away thoughts of the misaligned reflection and forced himself to concentrate on the meticulously repetitive tasks. That evening, the family gathered for a quiet dinner. Amanda wore a mask of weariness, which deepened the lines on her face. Sam seemed lost in her phone, while Maya clutched her stuffed rabbit, only picking at her food. The clank of silverware reverberated uncomfortably in the tension-filled kitchen. Normally, Ethan would try to lighten the mood with a quip or propose a family movie night. But tonight, he felt too drained. His reflection fiasco circled like crows in his mind, pecking at his sense of normalcy. Ethan got up first to clear the plates, telling Amanda he'd handled the dishes. She gave him a curt nod and offered a half-hearted smile. After placing the dishware on the counter, he approached the sink. Above it was a small window, too dark outside to see anything more than a faint reflection of the kitchen. There he was, faint but visible, moving in near-perfect unison as he turned the faucet. He held his breath, letting the water run. The watery, ghostly figure in the glass flicked its gaze toward him, or so it appeared. His heart pounded in his throat, a sudden wave of nausea coursing through his gut. He blinked once, then twice. His reflection only stared back, synchronized with every breath and blink. A shaky laugh escaped him, but it was forced. He turned off the water and bent down, feeling the tension build in his back. Enough of this nonsense, he thought. He took in a slow breath, popping his spine with a subtle stretch. When he straightened up, he found himself face to face with his reflection, which this time had an expression that didn't look quite like his own. The corners of the mouth were turned slightly upward, as though a different persona was creeping through. Ethan slammed the window shut with trembling hands, water dripping from his fingertips, and ran them through his hair. His heart hammered in his chest. He wrestled with the possibility that he might be hallucinating, but he had no history of mental illness, no overindulgence in substances, no clear reason why his mind would fabricate these illusions. His night passed in shallow pockets of sleep. He jolted awake multiple times, certain he heard a voice calling his name. Each time, Amanda lay motionless beside him, the children fast asleep in their respective rooms. Whenever he tiptoed to the bathroom to splash water on his face, he made sure to avoid looking at the mirror entirely. The dread felt too raw, too immediate. Come morning, Ethan was determined to verify whether what he saw was real or just frenzied imaginations. After Amanda and the kids left the house, Amanda to the clinic, the kids off to school, he found himself alone with his reflection. The house was all hushed corridors, the only noise being the hum of the refrigerator. Ethan ventured to the bathroom, swallowing the knot in his throat. He turned on the lights and faced the mirror above the sink. It was just him, with dark circles under his eyes and a tired posture. He exhaled softly, scanning every inch of his face. No sudden or delayed movements, no subversive smirks. After a tense minute, he almost laughed in relief. He pressed a palm to his chest, relieved that perhaps it had been fleeting stress. That was until the reflection winked. His stomach clenched as he jerked back in alarm. He hadn't winked. He was certain of that. But in the glass, his reflection's left eye had closed in a mischievous twitch, and now it wore a crooked grin that he definitely was not wearing on his own face. Ethan's mind reeled. He shook his head violently, blinking to clear his vision, but his reflection stood unnaturally still, seemingly enjoying his panic. Ethan's lips refused to form words. A wave of lightheadedness overcame him. He lunged for the switch and flipped off the bathroom light. Heart pounding, he leaned against the wall in the hallway, gasping for breath. It felt impossible to step back in there. Eventually he confided in half-whisper, "What's happening to me?" But no answer came. Instead, he felt the warming flush of shame for being too terrified to face his own reflection. That night was just as unkind. In bed, he tossed and turned, haunted by the sense that something was watching from every reflective surface in their bedroom, including the black screen of the TV. No matter how he turned, he couldn't get comfortable. He must have fallen asleep when an ominous dream grabbed hold. A dream in which he was pinned inside a giant mirror, unable to move as a shadow in the real world. Walked around with his face. The shadow spoke in a voice that was both eerily similar and completely alien. "Let me help you, Ethan. Let me show you the way." He woke, trembling. Sweat clung to his skin. Exhaling shakily, he glanced at the clock, noting it was past 3 in the morning. Amanda lay on her side, back turned to him. The kids slept in the next rooms. He got up quietly, determined not to check any reflection. He crept into the kitchen for a glass of water, but the overhead lighting glistened off the refrigerator's steel surface. Suppose the reflection was there, beckoning, watching. His hand jerked, nearly dropping the glass. He turned the light off and wandered back into the darkness of the hallway. The next few days blurred together. Ethan tried to stick to a strategy of ignoring all shiny surfaces, but that proved nearly impossible in modern life. Phones, screens, even cutlery conspired against him. Each new day seemed to add a layer of exhaustion, as though some intangible force was draining him from the inside. He missed a step in his routine at work, letting a defective part slip through inspection. His supervisor called him out, eyes narrowed in suspicion, but Ethan had no plausible explanation. Meanwhile, at home, he snapped at Sam for leaving her clothes scattered on the floor, prompting her to shout and storm off. He realized belatedly that his reflection had been in the bedroom mirror while he scolded her. The faint grin that flickered there fed a sense of dread Ethan couldn't voice. The slow override of his free will began before he consciously recognized it. Simple incidents stood out in hindsight. One morning he found himself uncharacteristically ignoring Maya's tearful pleas for help with her puzzle toy. Another day, he caught himself skipping lunch altogether, even though he felt ravenous. Then, in a moment that truly frightened him, he sidled up behind Amanda in the kitchen and hissed in her ear about how everything was her fault. The mounting debt, the distance in their marriage, his own anxiety. The words poured from his mouth as though someone had pressed play on a recording. With tears welling up, Amanda spun around and demanded to know what had happened to the man she married. But even as she asked, Ethan himself was reeling, unsure where those vicious words had come from. He certainly hadn't planned on saying them. Desperate, he tried to gather the family around for an honest talk, but Amanda was too hurt to engage. Sam locked herself in her room, and Maya withdrew into frightened confusion. The next time Ethan looked into a mirror, this time the full-length one in the hallway, he felt that dreaded presence intensify. The reflection studied him calmly, arms at its side, mouth unmoving. Yet Ethan felt an invasive sense of triumph emanating from it. His reflection began to show up in his peripheral vision. He'd be reading Sam's phone messages, checking for any sign of trouble, only to feel the hair on his neck prickle, as though eyes were boring into him. He'd turn slightly, and from the corner of his eye he'd see a fleeting shape in the glass of his phone. Always that same half smile, not quite malicious, but a grin that harbored secrets. The reflection was stalking him, slow and unyielding. Ethan started to lose track of small stretches of time. He'd come to realize that 10 or 15 minutes had vanished, and he'd have no memory of what he'd done or said during that time. Amanda confronted him about it when he forgot to pick up Maya from school. "Where were you?" she demanded, eyes brimming with anger. "Our daughter was waiting in the rain for almost an hour." He gaped at her, heart in his throat, clueless about why he had no memory of that entire hour. The last thing he recalled was glancing at himself in the bathroom mirror, noticing a faint swirl of movement behind his reflection's eyes. He stumbled over an apology, but it fell flat. Amanda said she couldn't trust him right now, and threatened to leave if this continued. Panicking, Ethan sought professional help. He made an appointment with a therapist, a slight, gray-haired man named Dr. Slater, who listened carefully as Ethan described what he perceived to be hallucinations and time lapses. Treading carefully, Ethan avoided speaking of the reflection's independence outright, fearing the therapist would dismiss him or declare him psychotic. Dr. Slater nodded sympathetically and asked about stress at work, at home, about childhood traumas. Ethan shared the mounting financial pressures, the strains in his marriage, how he felt overburdened and powerless. But he kept the darkest secrets to himself, like how a malevolent grin in the mirror seemed to manipulate his very thoughts. Stress can manifest in strange ways, Dr. Slater told him gently. Anxiety and depression can cause dissociative episodes. It's possible you're experiencing mild psychosis or illusions under extreme stress. We can talk about medication options or more therapy. Ethan cut him off. That's fine, he managed. At some level, the explanation should have comforted him, but it didn't. It felt too textbook, too dismissive of the palpable, horrifying certainty that his reflection was a separate entity determined to consume him from the inside out. As days passed, the reflection escalated its presence. When Ethan looked in a mirror, the figure on the other side didn't just smile or wink. It began to mouth words at him. The first time it spoke was in the battered restroom at the factory. Ethan stared, compelled, as the mirror image formed silent words. With shaky lips, Ethan whispered, "What do you want?" A voice unspooled in his mind, soft at first but rapidly growing in clarity. "I can make it easier," it said. "Let me take over. Your burdens will vanish if you just let go." Ethan wanted to tear himself away, but it felt as if invisible ropes bound him. He could only watch in terrified silence. The reflection's smile widened, and with it, Ethan felt a stirring behind his eyes, like something rummaging through his deepest thoughts. Fear coiled inside him, and sweat beaded on his upper lip. After what felt like an eternity, he managed to break free, stumbling out of the restroom like a wounded animal. He suspected the reflection was creeping further into his consciousness, controlling him bit by bit, as though practicing for a final takeover. The next morning, he missed a second appointment with Dr. Instead of heading to the therapist's office, he found himself in a near-empty parking lot behind an abandoned storefront with no clear idea how he got there. He had no memory of the drive from his house. The keys were still in the ignition, the radio playing a station he never listened to. He raised a trembling hand to the rearview mirror. In that small rectangular piece of glass, the reflection appeared calm and resolute, while Ethan's own eyes brimmed with despair. He yanked the mirror away in panic, but something in him still responded to that unspoken call. Compulsions that weren't his own began to bubble up. Twice he nearly took money from his daughter's piggy bank. Once he found himself about to throw a glass at Amanda in a heated argument, an action that horrified him. But in the moment, it felt so natural. Only at the last second did he wrest control back. With violent determination, he set the glass down, ignoring the savage trembling in his hand. Painful guilt gnawed at him, and he began to wonder if the reflection was actively orchestrating his downfall. It wanted him to destroy the relationships that rooted him to sanity, wanted him alone and desperate so it could consume him. That night, he locked himself in the bathroom, determined to challenge it directly. He avoided the mirror above the sink, turning instead to the tall mirror on the backside of the door. Nervous energy prickled through every nerve as he faced it. "I know you're in there," he said, his voice cracking. Instantly, the reflection responded, lips moving without him. Projecting words into Ethan's mind, it said, "You're miserable, aren't you? Overworked, underloved, terrified about the future. Let me relieve all of that. We could be unstoppable." "Leave me alone," Ethan hissed between clenched teeth. "I am not miserable. I have a family who needs me." The reflection lifted a hand that Ethan did not lift on his side, and placed a palm against the glass. "They won't save you from yourself, Ethan." Ethan felt his heart hammer faster. "I can't let you in," he muttered, eyes welling with tears. "I won't." The reflection exhaled, as though bored with his refusal. "Then you'll continue to suffer. More poor decisions, more pain, and eventually you'll come crawling back to me." A terrifying thought bubbled inside Ethan. What if the reflection was right? What if he needed the reflection to handle the stress, to keep the family afloat, to be bolder than he ever was on his own? But the reflection's methods felt sinister, manipulative. It would corrupt everything he held dear. Rage and despair mingled within him, and he slammed a fist against the door, as if that could banish the reflection. With a small, humorless laugh, the reflection vanished, becoming normal again. Time oozed by, every waking second a wrestling match. Ethan caught glimpses of what he might do under the reflection's influence. Lash out at Sam, nearly push Amanda aside, forget to pick up Maya from school. Then the overtaking episodes grew longer. One evening, Amanda confronted him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're scaring the kids," she cried, voice trembling. "And me? I can't do this anymore." She wanted to stay at her mother's for a while. Sam and Maya cowered in the hallway, watching silently. Ethan's heart threatened to crack in two. The reflection was succeeding in isolating him. He took a shaky step toward Amanda, wanting to beg her to stay, but his body froze. A flicker in the hallway mirror caught his eye. He saw the reflection's triumphant smile. Then he felt his neck rotate slightly, forcing his gaze away from Amanda, as though the reflection had taken hold of the strings controlling his muscles. To his own shock, Ethan heard himself saying, "Go then! Leave me. I don't care." The callousness in his voice was horrifying, as if he'd been possessed. Amanda's lips parted in pained disbelief, and she grabbed the girl's hands. Before Ethan could wrest control of his mouth, they were out the door, suitcases in hand. He felt like a puppet, forced to stand idle as everything he cherished walked away. A scream rose in his throat, but it lodged there, turning into a strangled gurgle. He finally managed to break free, stumbling into the hallway mirror. His own reflection glared at him, the expression triumphant and unrepentant. He roared in anguish, fists slamming into the glass. With a shatter, the mirror cracked, shards raining onto the floor. The reflection fragmented into countless slivers, but through each shard Ethan still saw that same half-smile. Blood trickled from his knuckles as he fell to his knees, sobbing in fury and despair. The reflection's voice, soundless yet piercing, filled his mind. "We can't be broken so easily, Ethan. I'll always be here." Over the next few days, Ethan moved through the house like a ghost. The silence was deafening without Amanda and the kids. Each time he walked by a reflective surface, he either covered it with a towel or avoided it entirely. In his lonely captivity, battered by guilt, fear, and an inexplicable longing for the reflection's twisted promise, he sank into a deep despair. The reflection's mental intrusion had not abated. Now that the family was gone, it whispered more fiercely in his thoughts at night. When Ethan closed his eyes, it conjured images of Sam and Maya hugging him, only to morph into a mocking grin that vanished from his embrace in a swirl of shadows. He fought back, but each time, the reflection re-emerged, stronger, exploiting every ounce of doubt. Then one evening, ethanol-laced exhaustion overcame him. Slumped on the couch, whiskey in hand, he drifted into a restless slumber. Dreams stirred, a swirl of black glass, his children calling his name, Amanda's tear-streaked face. Then abruptly the dream sharpened. He stood in front of the largest mirror he had ever seen, the reflection waiting there, arms folded. "You had your chance," the reflection said. "I'm taking the reins now." His pulse thundered. He tried to speak but found he had no voice. The reflection stepped out of the glass. They locked eyes as it walked up to him, pressed a hand against his chest, and then sank into him. The impact sent a burning wave through Ethan's bones. He jerked awake, drenched in cold sweat, the whiskey glass toppling from his fingers. For a few disoriented moments, he wasn't sure if he was still asleep. Everything felt different. His limbs were coated with leaden heaviness. Slowly he stood, and as he did so, the notion hit him that something else was steering him. When he moved, it was with a purpose that wasn't entirely his own. The living room mirror was covered with a sheet, but even the faint reflection in the TV screen showed a man whose eyes looked both haunted and oddly resolute. His phone buzzed, a text from Amanda, the first time she had contacted him since leaving. He tried to read the words, but there was a moment of static in his mind. The reflection's voice, a sardonic echo, whispered an order. "Don't let her back in until you're ready. Prove you'll do anything to keep us strong." He wrestled with the command. "No," he breathed, trembling. "She's my wife, my children." But the reflection's hold had grown. The phone slipped from his fingers. In the dark reflection of the TV screen, he saw his mouth twist into that familiar, grim smile. He realized then, with an icy flush, that he was losing the war for his own body. A single tear rolled down his cheek as the reflection pulled him toward the bedroom. He had no choice but to follow, every muscle in his body responding to those invisible strings. He tried to recall Dr. Slater's words, something about stress, illusions, medication. If he could only muster the will to call 911 or to call the therapist, Maybe someone could stop him from completing whatever dark objective the reflection had in mind. But longing to do so and being physically able were two separate things. The reflection's presence coursed through him, a vile electricity that overtook each step, each twitch of his hand. Ethan realized lamentably that the unstoppable force had integrated into his nervous system, flickering behind his eye, and it was hungry. He stumbled into the bathroom, where, despite having smashed the hallway mirror to shards, a smaller mirror remained above the medicine cabinet. By the faint glow of the overhead bulb, he saw himself. Or rather, they saw each other. "This is for the best," the reflection said, speaking aloud through Ethan's own lips. Ethan, or the remnants of him, tried to close his eyes, but the reflection forced them open, forced him to witness the final step of relinquishing control. It was forging a new version of Ethan, someone who would feel no guilt, only vague echoes of remorse, overshadowed by an unwavering desire for power, ease, and control over his life. The reflection's grin was a horrifying blend of malice and pity. In that last moment of clarity, Ethan's mind blazed with the memory of his children's laughter, the warmth of Amanda's embrace, the sense of responsibility he felt as a father, as a husband. He clung to those images, welling them up like a final line of defense. For a heartbeat it seemed to push the reflection's hold aside. "I love them," he rasped, tears spilling over. His fingers flexed, trembling, showing a flicker of self-determination. If he could only push the reflection out, if he could break every mirror and shatter every chance for it to see him. But the mirror was still there, and the reflection was already inside his mind. He felt a force tighten around his heart, pressing the thoughts and memories under an ever-thickening blanket of numbness. His body jerked, and he was forced to watch as his own eyes glazed over with a steely, vacant sheen. Amanda and the kids would eventually see him again. He realized that with one last fragment of thought. But it wouldn't be him. It would be something else, wearing his face, speaking with his voice, a reflection made flesh. He had failed to stop it in time. The final blink was a slow, drawn-out goodbye to the man he had been. When his eyelids reopened, the reflection's eyes peered out from behind them, triumphant, unchallenged, and fully in control. In the silence of the house, the new presence smoothed back its hair, looked at the battered shards of broken mirror, and let out a low, satisfied laugh. Then it turned off the bathroom light, steady footsteps echoing down the hallway. The real Ethan was gone, replaced by the reflection that had taken up residence in his own skin. And no matter how thoroughly one might demolish every glass surface in the house, some reflections can never be completely destroyed. They remain in the darkness, waiting for the moment to fulfill their silent promise, to twist a man's life inside out, one tiny movement at a time, until he belongs to them entirely,